Welcome to Sci-Fi Stories. If you love stories of courage and mystery, make sure to subscribe and join our growing community.
The shattered hull of the Imperial warship burned across the sky like a falling star. Debris rained down through the toxic clouds of planet Dravik. On the jagged surface below, a single escape pod crashed violently into a field of black crystal forests. Inside the pod, alarms screamed and sparks rained from broken circuits. When the smoke cleared, one man forced himself to move. His name was Aaron Hale, a human engineer who had spent the last 3 years as a slave maintaining the engines of the Imperial fleet. He pushed open the warped hatch and dragged himself into the cold alien wind. Then he heard a weak sound behind him. Someone else had survived the crash. Beneath a collapsed section of the pod's internal frame lay a figure most beings in the galaxy would instantly recognize. Empress Zyra of the Valorian Dominion. The conqueror of 70 star systems. The ruler whose fleets terrified entire civilizations. And at that moment, she could not even move. Her lower body was pinned beneath a twisted support beam, dark violet blood pooling across the cracked ground. Her glowing reptilian eyes locked onto the human kneeling beside her. Normally, a slave touching the Empress without permission meant immediate execution. But survival had rewritten the rules. Aaron didn't ask permission. He grabbed a broken metal bar and forced the wreckage upward inch by inch until the pressure crushing her spine finally lifted. Zyra gasped in pain as her body was freed, but when she tried to move her legs nothing happened. Her spine had been shattered during the crash. The most feared ruler in the galaxy had become helpless in the span of a few seconds. Aaron didn't say a word. Instead he began working. He tore apart the pod's emergency kit, building a crude splint from metal fragments and insulation cables. Every movement sent pain through Zyra's body, yet she remained silent, watching the human with growing confusion. Slaves were supposed to fear her, hate her, run from her. But this human simply focused on keeping her alive. Outside the broken pod, the crystal jungle of Dravik began to stir. Massive predators moved through the jagged forest, their bodies scraping against razor-sharp mineral growths that could slice through armor like paper. Aaron quickly realized the pod would not protect them for long. He pulled out the remaining power cells and began rigging small electrical traps around the crash site. Thin wires stretched between the crystals, ready to unleash bursts of energy against anything that approached too close. As night fell, the temperature dropped violently. Freezing winds howled through the broken hull. Aaron dragged the Empress closer to the pod's exposed reactor housing, where the remaining heat could keep them alive. Zyra watched him silently as he wrapped her wounds with strips torn from his own uniform. The human's hands were cut and bleeding from working with the razor crystals, yet he ignored the pain completely. For the first time in her long life, the Empress felt something unfamiliar. Respect. For days the two survivors endured the brutal planet together. Aaron scavenged resources, purified water from the toxic rain, and built crude shelters from wreckage and crystal branches. Each time he returned to the pod, he brought food first to the wounded ruler who once owned him. Slowly, the silence between them began to change. Zyra had ruled her empire through fear and absolute authority. Yet the man helping her survive treated her not as a master, but as another person fighting to live. After 2 weeks, Aaron finally stood beside the pod and looked toward the distant mountains. "I have to leave," he said quietly. "There's a communication relay somewhere beyond those ridges. If I reach it, I can send a signal." Zyra stared at him with narrowed eyes. Leaving meant risking death in the razor forests alone. Yet staying meant both of them would eventually die. Aaron removed the Imperial crest from her armor and placed it around his neck. "This will prove you're alive." Without another word, he disappeared into the crystal jungle. What followed became a legend whispered across the stars. The human engineer crossed hundreds of kilometers of lethal terrain. He sabotaged enemy outposts using nothing but improvised tools and his knowledge of Imperial technology. When he finally reached the capital world weeks later, he didn't arrive as a slave. He arrived carrying the living symbol of the Empress herself. In the throne chamber of the Valorian capital, armed soldiers surrounded the lone human as he raised the imperial crest high. The traitor who had seized the throne believed the Empress was dead. But moments later every screen in the palace flickered to life. A transmission from Dravik appeared. Empress Syra stood before the camera, leaning on a staff carved from black crystal, her body still healing but her voice stronger than ever. She spoke not about vengeance, but about truth. About the human who had saved her life when the empire she ruled would have left him to die. When she finally returned to the capital weeks later, the first person she approached was not a general or advisor. It was the human engineer standing quietly in the center of the hall. The Empress extended her hand toward him. The galaxy believed humans were weak, she said calmly. But it was a human who saved an empire. That day the laws of the Valorian Dominion changed forever. Slavery was abolished. And the man once forced to repair engines in the dark became the closest ally the Empress had ever known.